pleasure to be here this morning. I know Rolly and I have kind of gone back and forth between just what is a good time for the church and what's a good time for us, and everybody's got busy schedules. So we were excited to finally make this work, and we've been here all weekend, so just being doing family stuff with Rolly and Dion, and just a pleasure. If you guys, I'm sure you've had Dion's cooking, and you guys know how that is. So, to be honest, I don't know how I've gone this far and this long without eating some of that. So it's good to get a taste of Dion's cooking and just the friendship. So before I get started, let's pray. God, thank you so much for all you do. I'm just thankful for who you are. I'm thankful for this church and the things that are the people that you're using through this church, and just how you're working through this church, and just pray that you continue to bless this community, bless them, and just thank you for the opportunity to share about what you're doing, God. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. Well, as I was thinking about this morning, we do a fair amount of presentations, whether it's at churches or civic groups or just smaller groups, this and that. But most of the time, it's just kind of program related. What exactly do we do with the programs, the families we serve, and I will get into some of that for sure in a little bit. But I just felt, really, as I thought about it with our relationship with the Snitkers, and really, some of you guys, most of you guys probably have heard a little bit about Whetstone, but don't know a whole lot. I just thought it was important to share a little bit of the history of the beginning, of how God has worked, because I think it's important for us to share with others just what God is doing and how God is working. And this is God's ministry. This is nothing. The only reason we're still going is because God has shown up in so many different ways at so many different times. And I just wanted to share a few of those highlights with you. I'm not going to get into the exhaustive history of Whetstone. We don't have time for all of that. But I did want to share a little bit of perspective of the just timeline and just some of the things that God has done to show up. And so I hope you guys are encouraged by some of the stories, and just as He calls all of us to go out in our own way, in our own talents, He's given each of us the ability to go out and share and make disciples, and that looks different for each one of us. But I think when we take that step and go out and actually do that, how God blesses that is pretty exciting and scary. I mean, it really is. There's so many times where it's like, all right, we're sunk. I'm sure all of you guys have felt that way at times, but God has come through. And so with that, I will share. I'll start a little bit. In 1998, a good friend of mine, Nathan Dahlstrom, was working with a 12-year-old boy in West Yellowstone, Montana. And the more he got to know this boy, he was mentoring him in a horrible family situation. And the more he got to know the family situation, he realized how much abuse was happening at home, and there was no father in the home, and there was neglect, there was physical and emotional abuse, and a lot of different things going on. That was really the first time Nathan had really seen firsthand. What he says, that's the first time I really saw Satan at work, and that was really kind of a spiritual just kind of smack in the face for him to really see that and really see some evil personified. And that was really the birth of Whetstone Boys Ranch right there. Through that experience with that relationship and working with that young man, God put on Nathan's heart Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And so it was just, he saw in this boy's life that he did not have a father figure. He did not have anybody growing up to speak truth into his life and to really mentor and come alongside and give the nurturing that we all need growing up from mom and dad. And so that was kind of the roots of really God stirring in him to do something, for he knew that this young man represented many, many other young men that needed help. And so that was kind of the genesis of the vision. And the other thing that God had spoken to Nathan was Ecclesiastes 4:12. And Ecclesiastes 4:12 just says, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves, and a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. So as I was thinking about this morning too, and again with the Snickers, the word relationships really stuck out to me. And just how God orchestrates relationships and how important relationships are. And when he calls us to do certain things, we're not alone in those endeavors. And we can't do it alone. And so it was interesting that this Ecclesiastes 4:12 verse, Nathan felt he didn't really understand at first why God why this passage was important to him, but he finally realized. He just said, that cord of 3 strands, he felt like, this is what I want you to do, is this idea of Whetstone, have some property where you introduce boys to a mentoring element, and there was other things with just a bigger property, creation, nature, animals, trying to introduce boys to the things that boys love to do, and using those as a means of mentoring through some of those elements. But the other part of that is like, Nathan, I don't want you to do this alone. I'm going to bring 2 other guys along the journey, because it's hard to do these things alone. And it's hard, and it's easy to kind of go off on your own, and I want some accountability for you. And there's strength in numbers. And so we didn't know this, my other friend Jeremy and I, but Nathan kind of had these things written down that, hey, this Whetstone idea, iron sharpening iron, and I'm going to bring 2 people at some point. He had no idea. He was just, at some point, he just felt there was going to be 2 other people joining the team, and I don't know who they are. And so that was really, again, back in 1998, to get some perspective. That's a long time ago. And so Jeremy and I have kind of our own testimonies of how God was working, and us a few years later, I hit my degrees in construction management. Actually, Jeremy's degrees in construction management. He had a moment where he said, God, I'm not satisfied with what I'm doing in my life. Can you please show me my next steps? About a weekend later, he gets diagnosed with a brain tumor and almost dies. And that's a whole, again, I'm not going to go into all the details, but God's working on Jeremy and gives him a brain tumor. And you hear him tell the story. He knew the whole time that God answered his prayer, and somehow this was going to be working for his greater good. And that Jeremy was not afraid of dying, even though everybody else, he had a very severe brain tumor. And it debilitated him for 6 years. My side, I got a degree in construction management, and I was doing that for a few years and got to a point where I just felt a stirring that I was not doing what God wanted me to do. And I hit my knees in that little travel trailer that I was living in, and I said the same thing. I just kind of laid myself open. I was like, God, I don't know what's next for me, but I feel like there's something else, and I feel like I need you to show me what my next steps are, because I just was discontent. And so through some of these stories, God was orchestrating all of these things together. And so in 2003, basically Jeremy's story, my story, I had met Nathan in college, and we basically called each other at different times. And we say, Nathan, we had known about Whetstone, but had never thought about being a part of Whetstone until now. And so we called Nathan, and I was actually the third party of it to say, hey, I think God's calling me to this Whetstone thing. I don't know what it looks like, but I can't get it out of my mind. And where are you at with it? What is it? Where are you at with Whetstone? Because at that point, it was still just on paper, and there wasn't a whole lot of progress. Well, at that point, he we meet together, and he tells us, he's like, hey, I never told you guys, obviously, because I don't even know who God is bringing together, but he tells us, about this Ecclesiastes 4:12 thing. It's like, I've known for years that God's going to bring two guys, but I've not known who they are. Now I think I know who they are. And so Jeremy and I were just like, that was really the first time it's like, holy cow, I don't think this is an accident. And really for me, I grew up in church, but like to really be at a point of where just kind of opening yourself up to God and to be moldable and to see some of those steps of faith being taken and to be able to see some of those action steps and Him coming through. So at that point, the quarter 3 strands, that was a pretty big moment that God had showed up. And so at that point, it was like, okay, now we need to work with some at-risk youth. Let's confirm that maybe God is doing this. And so we ended up in Colorado working on a program to get some experience. And we ended up in Lakewood Church of Christ, where there's a couple of other ministries. There's a Dry Bones ministry for homeless kids in downtown Denver. We had heard about that, and the church that had sponsored it. And so we decided to show up at Lakewood Church of Christ, and Jeremy and I ended up sitting in front of two ladies. One loves to entertain, and the other one loves to cook. And one is Linda Beck, and one is Dion Snitker. And they see two basically college-age guys in front of them, and Linda, being her shy self, just says, hey, what are you guys doing here? What's going on? What's your story? And we just proceeded to tell her a little bit about, hey, well, we're here because God's told her a little bit about Whetstone. And it was just like, well, you guys are coming to our house this afternoon, so we need to hear more about this. And so it just didn't make sense that, like, why would they even care about, like, what we're doing from a ministry standpoint? Yeah, we're the church. Yeah, we support those things. But it was like, we had no idea who they were. And, like, instantly, it was a connection, and they were bought into it. And really that whole church got bought into what we were doing, what God was doing. And that church ended up getting support. As Rolly said, we were going to start it out there in Colorado. But God had other plans and moved us to Missouri, which obviously ended up being close to where a lot of their friends and where they grew up. And it just is interesting how things work out and how God works those things out. But that church, we still have so many great relationships. Again, going back to the relationship thing and how God orchestrates people to do His service, and how that church rallied behind us and sent us all the way out here. We had a kind of a Sunday send-off. They raised a ton of money for us for the work to keep pursuing out here, even though it wasn't where we thought it would be. And those relationships, many of them remain today. And so Laura and I moved out. We didn't have any kids at that point. You've probably seen them. We have a few kids. We have 6. So the other part of that at Shelterwood, another confirmation, a huge confirmation. That year that we worked at a group home, we just kind of laid a fleece out before God and just said, God, we believe that you're calling us to this vision of Whetstone, but please confirm in us through this year of working with young men that that's the direction you want us to go, or give us more direction. And that was kind of the prayer. And He came through and answered that prayer. I met my wife. She was working with the teenage girls on that property. And it was just one thing after another that God confirmed in us the decision that He was calling us to. And a lot of times it was just enough to kind of keep us going. A lot of you guys probably have been there and feel God calling you to a thing. You go out and step out in faith, and then it just feels like He's gone. It feels like Job sometimes, or feels like Moses. Just like, God, you called me to this. I don't feel equipped. And here are all these people, they have no idea. You know, they're following idols now, and you just feel alone. But then we cry out, and God, that's been the Whetstone story. Time after time after time. So Laura and I moved out in 2008 to West Plains, Missouri to start a program. The property we were looking for kind of fell through, but there was more relationships there and that God orchestrated, relationships that didn't make sense. People that became board members of Whetstone that are still really involved with us today that, you know, these small towns, like it's hard to break into these small towns sometimes, but God just opened doors one after another. And in 2011, we closed on a piece of property where we're at today, and the house was just set up perfect for us for starting what we wanted to do and working with young men. So we started in 2011, and we started working with boys. And what happens in 2015? Tornado hits the property. Just when we were kind of getting our groove, or filling up our beds, and getting staff, and really feeling like we knew what families and boys worked well with Whetstone, a tornado hits the property, shuts us down for 3 months, and almost shut us down for good. And so it was easy to be like, God, like, what the heck? Like, we are trying to do what you call us to do. We're just now getting to the spot where we feel like we're figuring it out, and a tornado comes, and now we have no boys and probably no program. Like, we didn't have insurance for loss of revenue or anything like that. We had insurance for the houses and whatnot. But it's just easy to question those things. But again, relationships that we had established there, the next day there was about 60 people that show up with chainsaws, equipment, backhoes, skid steers, I mean, just people to come and get us back on our feet. And money. There was probably $100,000 that was raised in, you know, a matter of a month or two in order for us to get back on our feet and keep going. So it's just like when you think all is lost, God comes through with relationships, through relationships, to carry out his purpose. And so that's really been the story of Whetstone from the beginning. And again, to see so many of those relationships that are key, that have been with us from the beginning and have supported us from the beginning, and to be just sitting here and in front of you guys, or standing here in front of you guys, talking about Whetstone, it just is testimony to who God is and how he uses the relationships. And so one of the things, before we kind of transition to some of the program, the technical parts of the program, is that out of that tornado, we had not just the house that got destroyed, we had a big stand of pine trees that got decimated. And all these big pine trees that were just laying on the ground. And we didn't want them to sit and rot on the ground. And we love to build, and we love to do things with our hands, and we love to incorporate those things with the boys. And so out of that storm was this idea called cabin week. So we wanted to take all those sticks, basically all these huge trees, and build a log cabin as a project with the boys. And so in 2016, Cabin Week was born, and every week in the spring, we take a week off with the staff and the boys and anybody in the community to come and work on a log cabin. And that is something today, we call that cabin Ebenezer. And with the story in 1 Samuel 7:12, as you know, Ebenezer means stones of help. And so as Samuel set this up to commemorate God's help with the Israelites after defeating the Philistines in Mizpah, a lot of times, you know, they would set up these rocks, and to be able to tell those stories of how God helped them in troubled times. And so that cabin is named Ebenezer, And that kind of stands as a testament to who God is for Whetstone and the help that He's brought us through time and time again. And it's also a teaching tool for our boys that we use to just help them understand that our lives, we don't have to be defined by our past. God makes beautiful things out of the rubble, and that's what our lives represent through Him when we accept Him. That God really is in the business of restoration, and that's really the key thing that we try to do out there is to create space for relationships to happen through activities and things that we hope boys love to do in order to just earn the right to speak truth in the lives of these young men. And so that's a little bit of the history of Whetstone and some of the high points. And just, again, I just wanted to share with you that there's so many hundreds of other little ways that God has worked to get us where we are at. And He's done it through people. He's done it through relationships. And I know that some of you guys, if not all of you guys, have experienced that and just how important that is to have community and have relationships and to not be isolated. I think, let's transition let's go ahead and, so this first video that we're going to show it's a video that's on our website, but it shows just a family's journey through Whetstone. And it's a pretty accurate depiction of just some of the emotions, some of the things that families go through when they come to drop their son off at Whetstone. So that's what this first video is, if you want to go ahead and play
that. If your life has become an endless string of battles with your son, if you've been living one day at a time for so long that you've been unable to look up, if you're afraid of what the future holds, if your son is sitting right next to you, but he feels miles away, and you've no idea how to get him back, there is a place that can help. Whetstone Boys Ranch in Mountain View, Missouri. But how can anyone get through to him? You feel like you've tried everything, like you've given everything. Is there anything left? We're here to tell you, yes. There is hope for change. It won't come fast, and it won't come easy. But Whetstone has walked this road with hundreds of families who have felt just like you. We know what it's like, and we know how to help. Your son is not too far gone. He can face the pain in his past. He can embrace responsibility for his future. He can learn from his mistakes, while you learn from yours. Whetstone will engage his mind, challenge his assumptions, and build a foundation for future success. He will be held accountable for his actions and his words. He'll develop self-control and perseverance. He'll hone honesty and loyalty and kindness to others. He'll have daily opportunities to connect with God and His creation, to test himself against the wild, to question truth, and to discover it for himself. And while every boy is different, one thing stays the same. Change happens in community. We'll make mistakes along the way, but in the end, he can find faith where there is failure. He can find life where there is loss. And most important, he can find his way back to you. Since 2011, Whetstone Boys Ranch has been sharpening the character of young men. Contact us today if you need help placing your son in an environment that will shape him into the man you know he can be, the man God intended him to be. After Whetstone, you'll go back the way you came, but you'll see things differently. You won't have a brand new son, but you will have a son with a brand new future.
All right. Can you guys still hear me? I don't know if this is a little clunky. But, anyway, yeah, that's a pretty good depiction of, we tried to catch a little bit of the emotion that is going through the parents before they bring their son to Whetstone. As you can imagine, just prior to even making the decision to send a son to Whetstone, all the stuff that's been going on at home. Many of you guys have probably had some experiences with families, or maybe your own experiences of just trying to figure out what we do with our son, or maybe some of you guys have adopted some boys that struggle. And so when families call Whetstone, they are at a point of exhaustion. They are at the end of their rope. They've tried everything really at home through just local therapy, local programs, and they really don't have any other place to turn to. So you can imagine being in that spot to try to save your son. A lot of times parents feel that it's a matter of life and death, depending on what the boy's into and how physical things have maybe gotten in the home. We work, as Rolly said, we work with boys 12 to 16 years old, and we contract directly with parents. We work with boys and families all over the country. And probably 40% of our boys are adopted. So in those situations, sometimes the adopted boys are, physically harmful to maybe biological kids. And so there is a situation that's unsafe at home where parents just need some separation. And so that's when they call us, or that's where Whetstone steps in and tries to give the families some help. And so Whetstone is considered a therapeutic boarding school, so we provide therapy for the families and the young men themselves. We vet our families pretty heavily as far as how involved are you going to be in the therapy. If our parents are just kind of like, I can't deal with them, I'm going to wash my hands of them for a year, you guys deal with them. It doesn't work, as you guys probably know. Because if a kid is 12 years old and things have been happening in the family for 6-7 years, to get to this point, it's not all the boys' fault. There's a lot of things going on with mom and dad, or the family structure. A lot of times the families are broken. They come from broken homes. Dad, everybody's busy. It just seems like a lot of our families, everybody's going at 80 miles an hour, and sometimes kids get lost in the shuffle. So there's a host of reasons why families come to Whetstone, but ultimately the goal of Whetstone is to restore the boys and the families on a better foundation after the 9 to 10 months average that they're with us. And we reintroduce them back home and give them the parents tools, give them the kids tools, and so that's kind of the structure of Whetstone. And we do that through, we have a work program where they go to school 4 days a week. We have school on campus, and so their schooling amounts to about a semester's worth of school during the time that they're at Whetstone. And it's a level program, so when they come in, they don't have a whole lot of freedoms, and they have to earn rights and privileges as they go through the levels. And so between the school and work program and house, just life training skills, they earn different privileges, and they move through the levels until they graduate. And therapy is a big part of that as well. They have to really be working on their therapeutic goals, and if there's a breakdown in any one of those things, then they don't get to, the signature to get to the next level and to kind of move through the program. So that's a little bit of the structure as far as how the program itself works, but the main ethos behind Whetstone from the beginning, as I said, with just the relationships, the space. We operate on 285 acres. We believe that boys should be outside, boys should be connecting with nature, boys should be doing things with their hands and not on screens. And so we We don't let them have any phones. We do movies and we do some music, but they don't play video games and they don't have phones because those things, as we've noticed over the years, are basically toxic. I'm not going to beat around the bush on that. It's just not good. And so, like what we see, probably the biggest addiction that we see are boys addicted to video games and social media, and along with that is pornography. I mean, thinking about 12-year-old boys, the exposure that they've had to some of these things is will blow you away, and it's pretty sad to see. And so, as I talked about before, with some of the like relationships, and what Satan is good at is isolating. And I know he uses our phones to create this division and isolation. It's not just phones, it's just technology and busyness. And so just encouraging word, hopefully an encouraging word, and just for all of us as believers and who God calls us to be, is to be engaged, especially as dads. We need to be engaged with our family. And we all fall short as far as we're so tied to our phones because of work and everything else. It's a very intentional thing that we have to do, to put those things away, to look our kids in the face, engage with them, and know what they're into, know what they're doing. And so I say that to mention that we're seeing more and more effects of families who use the phone as a babysitter. And these kids don't know how to do relationships. They're addicted to just screens in general, and it's just not a good thing. So we don't see that going away anytime soon. So I just wanted to just give a charge to, especially us as dads and the men of who God calls us to be in the church, is to, even if we don't have kids in the home anymore, like there's so many kids out there in this community. There's probably dozens of young boys who don't have dads, who come from broken homes, and God is probably already using you guys to do some of that just with the facilities you guys have here. But we have to be intentional as a church to mentor these young men that don't have these basic rearing needs that God has provided. The biological family, when it breaks down, there's just consequences. Doesn't mean they're broken, or doesn't mean that they're, throwaway kids. It just means they struggle more. And that's where we as men step up, and as a church have to be the leaders for that problem. And so Whetstone is just trying to do the best we can to help be a small part of that problem out there, and to help be a resource for other dads that are in the program. We do a father-son weekend, and so we try to help just give those dads a charge, and in a time where there's a lot going on in their world, and we just try to be a light to them. So to wrap up, in 2020, we decided that we were growing to a spot where we needed to expand, and we were kind of getting really tight in the space where we were at, and felt God calling us to expand our program and double it by 9 boys. Right now, the house we currently operate in is 9-boy capacity, and we are in the middle of a construction project to expand by another 9 boys, and have house parent living quarters and things like that. So it's kind of another God story. It's just a crazy time to build. It doesn't make sense, God's timing, but we realize God's timing is not our timing. And a lot of times we just are along for the ride, and we just try to do the best we can with what He gives us, and just trust that He's going to bring the resources at the right time, and He always does. And so I want to just leave you guys with, there's a time-lapse video that we put together. It's not the whole project, it's probably 5 minutes, but the time-lapse video of just some of the construction progress to get you a visual of the house we're building now, and hopefully being able to be done around mid-January, and just what God continues to do out at Whetstone. And so if you want to go ahead and play that video. As you can see, it's pretty massive. It's a pretty big building, and that the logo there, 2030, the 30 by 30. That's the campaign slogan as we were feeling God moving us to grow. Our goal is to have 30 boys and families that we work with by the year 2030. We're trying to be successful with this. This is going to double our capacity and get us to 18, and we won't get too ahead of ourselves. But that's the goal, is just to keep growing and serving more families. And like I said, that house is probably, we're looking mid-January to complete and start filling that one up. And there'll be 9 boys with their separate bedrooms and bathrooms, house parent living quarters. There'll be a school in the basement, and there'll be a rec facility kind of in the basement, rec room for the boys, as well as 2 live-in staff living quarters. So there'll be a lot going on in that house, and just, again, going back to space and relationships. From the beginning, what we feel sets Whetstone apart from other organizations is our ratios of staff to boys. So we've always maintained a 3-boy to 1 staff ratio, just because we believe that those boys need time to develop relationships with the staff in order to speak truth into their lives. And so that's something that we have not wavered from, and we feel that that's very important. And everything we do, we try to create space for relationships to happen, because that's where the growth goes. The growth happens. That's where Christ really, we've seen, intervenes, and how he works is through relationships. And so just thank you guys for being a part of this project and this church, supporting the work that we do out there. We can't do this work without so many like you guys helping us out. And so we are humbled that you guys have chosen to support Whetstone and what we do. There's some of you guys have taken some of the materials. There's just some more program stuff if you guys are interested more in what we do. I love giving tours of the property, so it's always great when people come and see firsthand and meet our boys, meet our staff. It's much more of a dynamic experience to see what God's doing. So if you guys are in the area, would love to, my card is back there, just give me a shout and we can set that up and continue to learn. If you want to learn more about what we do, just let me know. So thank you guys again for this opportunity. I appreciate it.